close now.
Mhm.
Chemistry's kind of coming along, so that well, hello, I'm Pastor Henry Green, and welcome to The Code. Tonight, you're going to see something that's very rare, 3 generations of Black men chopping it up. We know if we keep talking through it, that we can work out this thing together. But I want to take a moment and allow my co-hosts to introduce themselves and the group they represent.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tawi Patterson, aka Doc P. I am I'm a millennial. Put you like that, a millennial. I'm sit back, relax, welcome to The Code.
Hey everybody, my name is Dwayne Lloyd, the 818 original on Instagram, Twitter, and I represent that 50-something crowd. I'll be 51 this year, so I hope what we say today will bless you. Welcome to The Code.
And as I said, I'm Pastor Henry Green. When you get my age, we don't use numbers anymore. We just say the plus crowd. And welcome to The Code. Today, we've got a very interesting topic that's going to revolve around the concept of trust. But I believe we're going to hit several different layers on this subject matter. But ultimately, we want to get to why we as a people don't trust us. And so we've got to start with like this whole concept of what trust is and how it works for us.
Well, go ahead, Tom.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
I think trust is that thing that you can rely on, that thing that is, that you can lean on, that when you don't have it, this thing or this person has it. And so often, I think in the Black community, we were taught by slave masters, and it was passed down to us that we can't be trusted with our own welfare. And so if you can't be trusted with your welfare, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like that's the most basic foundation of having a trust. If you can't trust you, I mean, then, where do you go from there? That's like the worst.
Well, I think with African Americans, it's inherent for us now that it has been so active. It was just like you guys saw the mass shooting the other day. I think it was down in Miami or I'm not sure.
At the nightclub.
What was distinctly different is when they showed the crowd shot, man, those people scattered like quick. I mean, like if they hadn't had semi-automatic weapons, they wouldn't have got very many people. Because I mean, like instantly, first shot, you see the whole crowd duck, and everybody's like moving for cover. And when we see other ethnic groups in shootings, it doesn't happen like that. Yeah. And like I think we have, as a racial group, had to be on guard so much of our lives that our instincts take us to a place of distrust.
Mm-hmm.
I think that trust for me is defined by one's emotional ability to understand someone else's consistency in relationship. So if we go back to slavery days and, the first ship before the Mayflower in the 1619 era, because we all know, well, most of us know, I would like to think that American history didn't begin in 1776, it began in 1619. And we were, as a people, the first to do many different things across society. It's just been kind of wiped out. And so now that we're coming back to that, one of the things that slave masters did, or that we need to understand before I get to that point, is that when slaves were slavery was something that happened. We were not slaves. We were enslaved. We had kingdoms. We were kings. We were religious figures. We were doctors. We were lawyers. We were several different things in our kingdoms. Just like casualties of war. If me and Dee are in war and I'm a king and he's a king and we win, then his people are enslaved by us, right? Their land, their property. And so that's what that was. It wasn't just, oh, we're going to go over and start taking people. And so that also meant that our dialect, our customs, our attributes, our habits were not the same. So even though we appeared to be the same, our way of doing life was different. In the kingdom of Patterson, in the kingdom of Lloyd, things didn't operate the same, right? And so you take those groups of people from various different places, Sierra Leone, from the Congo, from Ethiopia, from South Africa, and you throw them on a ship together. There's already naturally beef because we don't mess with each other. And so then you bring that group of people here and those innate customs that were built into your social structure live on. And so that's genetic. It's something called post-traumatic slave disorder. And that's that concept that what happened over 400 years ago is genetically still innately in us. We still do not believe in the authenticity and or the ability to be connected kindredly with one another because of that. And so now you have today where you go into your own community and you're looking over your shoulder because you done made it a little bit. In my case, I just went to college. Everybody stopped talking to me from the hood just because I went to school. So innately in their mind, this was a battle to be seen as better. But if you go back to the plantation, it was the same mentality. Yeah. As a field hand or as a house hand on Master's plantation, you were doing everything you can to be in a good space with him because you didn't want the whip. You didn't want to be chastised. You were willing to be hated by your own people to be in good graces with him, whether that was sexually, physically, mentally, or emotionally. And we've carried those same customs from them to now. So that's, to me, why there's a trust issue in our community.
But the trauma of the middle crossing, though, is something that, like I was talking to one of my aunts yesterday. And I had the privilege of going to Accra in Ghana. And there's a slave castle there. And I actually did a documentary. And I'll have to share it with you, brothers.
Please
but
do.
It was, I don't know, it wiped us out. Like when we toured the slave castle, I mean, literally, like we went to lunch afterwards and we couldn't talk. I mean, like you was sitting there like, and I've got it. This was really before video because this was probably about 23 years ago, maybe. So it was before we had cell phone with video capability and all of that stuff. And so I literally just took a bunch of stills and I also did cassette recordings to show you how long ago this was. And I kind of married the two in this documentary. And there's a moment after we toured the castle that we were actually at this door, the C door that they called the door of no return. Because basically the Africans were saying, once you went through that door,
you never came out.
We never saw you again.
Wow.
And I mean, like you can hear us and we are crying and you hear the ocean in the background. And the president of the seminary started to cry and he said, we came back today to say that the door of no return is a lie.
Wow.
And I mean, literally, like they take you through the dungeons and they still stink. And the floor is spongy and they work you because they said you may be walking on the bodies of some of your ancestors. They said when people died a lot of times in the dungeons, they didn't even bother to take the bodies out. They just let them decompose there.
Wow.
So, the floor you're walking on is a combination of dead bodies and feces and urine. And so you can imagine how long slave trade has stopped, and it still has a stench.
Wow.
And you just begin to see the horrific treatment of our people. And that's a trauma that I believe would get in your DNA.
Absolutely.
And cause a whole, you go, as you say, Tavi, from being kings and princes and free men to being stacked on a boat like cargo.
And then when you take into account, going back to and marrying this with, a trust or a mistrust, as it were, when you take into account that the first slave landed here in 1619, and nobody said it was wrong until 1821, 202 years. So it went from who are these people who are taking us away to, for 200 years, nobody said nothing. Nobody even mentioned it. And so you think about like in the construct of a man or woman and trust. You meet a woman, and for me and my wife, it was 4 years that went by before I felt like the trust was there that I could make her my wife, my life partner. That's just 4 years. It took 4 years for me to build that trust. So you figure what kind of trust or mistrust was built over the span of 202 years. If they had proven that they were dangerous to us, slave owners, the mentality of the slaves and the people and their descendants who were here had adapted to some degree, trusting these people who we really shouldn't have trusted. For 202 years, nobody said nothing. And during that time, there had to be a certain level of trust built where, you know what? Yeah, I don't know where my son and his wife and kids are, and I don't know where my other kids are, but I'm gonna just hold tight to this fact that if I don't do this thing what Master say do, this is what's gonna happen to me. So I'm gonna spend day in and day out eating and working and doing what I have to do just to live.
Yeah.
You also have to understand that the Middle Passage is the worst. It was the worst component of slavery. It is said that so they picked up so many people that they were throwing people overboard, babies and everything. And it was said that sharks followed slave ships because they knew that there would be fresh meals.
Right.
The horror, the raping, the beating, the pillaging. And then you still have to trust the oppressor with your life.
Right.
And the pain that's connected to that experience of trust. And then trusting them, but not trusting the person who looks like you, ashamed to, is something that has been seeped into our genetic value since our inception here. And so we are more willing to go do business with a Caucasian man because he showed up in a suit than a brother in the hood who got an 818 Originals hat on, who really has integrity. Just because the white guy appeared to be trustworthy, and then when they do us bad, we're okay with it, and we just were quiet about it. But when the brother does you bad, you want the whole world to know. And so we facilitate the dismantling of ourselves consistently. One thing I've learned, even in the spirit of working in business, and now that a couple of my clients you're doing big things, and I have one that's like, doing some major stuff in the film industry. We were just talking today about the integrity. Like if I'm going to work with you, you have to have a level of integrity. If we're sitting somewhere and somebody tells you that they got something good with money and I don't like it, I'm leaving, period. I have my own money. I will get on a plane and go home, and you can do whatever you want to do with that, because I can't afford to let whatever I built up to be damaged. And I think that as long as we have our business publicly sent out there, instead of probably going to the table saying, you know what, Pastor, that what we had didn't work. Why? Right? With an understanding that we're fine. But we, in this age of social media, do a very, 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 very huge disservice to ourselves because we're competing, but we've been taught to be that way genetically from the start. And it wasn't because we wanted to, it was a survival mechanism. I couldn't trust you because if we're trying to run away tonight and I tell you, they might kill me and my wife. You know, they don't love us. We're cattle to them. You know, and so all those things and so much more are innately built into why we don't rock with one another today.
Man, but I can tell you now, I'm probably getting ready to get in trouble right now. But man, one of the things that I probably have least tolerance for in the world are Black people that have not evolved past the point that white business is better. I mean, oh man, like when I run into those people, oh, I mean, you know, y'all pray for me. I'm still growing in grace in that area. but it is, you know, like I had a case where we were doing a deal and for an organization I was connected with, and we had a brother that was highly qualified for the deal. He had done quite a few of these kind of deals, one of the few Blacks that had experience in this area. And, you know, the head of the organization chose to go with a white firm that was no more qualified. And I'm like, you know, I'm like losing it because it's like, why wouldn't you give the brother the shot? I mean, you know, there's so many pieces of business that he just can't get in on. And here, a predominantly Black organization, he has the credibility, he has the experience, but I run into those people that really believe that the white man's ice is colder.
And as a screenwriter, it's real prevalent because what you find is there are writers, white writers, who are getting jobs to write Black stories. Wait, stop.
Yeah.
You mean to tell me, you know, nothing against the white guy, but you mean to tell me that you trust a white guy who's never lived a day in Black skin to write a Black story? Are you
never lived a day?
Are you high?
Never lived a day. Yeah.
It blows me away. And so, you know, and I find myself at times having to try to push harder, and my agent, who's the best agent in Hollywood, trying to push harder to get my stuff read, where they're looking for Black content against the white screenwriters. That makes no sense.
I just had a conversation with a friend of mine literally this afternoon about a friend of ours who is who does community work, who is Caucasian, who happens to be also a part of the LGBTQ community and some other things. And, you know, being an ally and all that good stuff, and people like that who are in spheres of influence, and how if they're not careful, they come off like they know more about what being Black is than I do.
Right.
So you can read as many books as you want to, know as much data, statistics as you possibly want to, get as many degrees as you want to. It will never compare you to walk in what this is every single day. And so not only are we contending with trust from ourselves, we in our community don't vet people properly who say that they're for us. And I was like, these people get privileged and get the opportunities to sit in seats because their people will reject them, but are more comfortable hearing about our experiences through their lens. That's not authentic. That makes you a puppet, you know? And so I share your same sentiment, Pastor, that I don't understand why we go out here, and I don't have red bottoms or Gucci or any of that. I think that it's ridiculously overpriced. I think that I don't get it. I make everything that I wear look good, period. That's what I do. I don't think that it's important, and it doesn't make me any more relevant to wear a Gucci belt than to wear one from Walmart. I'm sorry. And I'm not going to give you $2,000 for a trend from a person that has openly and historically not liked people who look like me.
Right.
And so we get the stars out here to promote it. You have all of your Balenciagas, your Gucci's, your Louis Vuittons, and all these other factors, and then we will willfully pay $2,000 or $3,000 for a wear bottom shoe and then brag about it. But then your brother or your sister who has a boutique hand makes his or her stuff and it's the bomb, and their t-shirt is $60, and it has to be because of material and stuff like that. But you want to, dang, that's expensive. Oh my God, why am I gonna pay you for that? But you're gonna go out here and spend your money on somebody who openly, defiantly, and aggressively has made their point and their position on people who look like you clear. And so in every sector, whether that's entertainment, whether that's church, like there's a mimic for everything. Like I've heard you preach, Pastor. I've heard TD Jakes, but then you have the Cheryl Brady's of the world, wonderful woman of God. Your Rod Parsons of the world, your Paula Weiss of the world, and we flocked to them. And then in this last election year, we found out who they really were. And now you flock back to your own for the "I told you so" moment. I don't understand that either. No matter what the sector is, we make it so much harder for our own people to evolve and succeed and make them work harder to trust you when the person that puts you on that happens not to look like you, whether that's no matter what the ethnicity is already thinking differently about you. And you're comfortable with going through that for the position of the seed. And to me, it's all genetic. It goes back to that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That is all innately built in us to think that we're the enemy to one another.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that we have to rise on a conscious level. Because I know because I'm entrepreneurial, there's certain things that I do and I'll pay for. Like my wife even gets angry with me at moments because I'm Black. I'm just, that's just like back when Blockbuster was going, we go get movies. I'm like, we got to get at least one Black movie.
Right,
we do 3 movies. One of them got to be Black. And unfortunately, a lot of them were bad. But they're bad for a reason because the system is set up against them. Like I was studying for a series I'm coming up into, and I was looking at the movie Soul from Disney. And so then I went back through and listened to the director's cut. And D, you can appreciate this because the guy was saying, well, we felt like this part wasn't right. So we sequestered a team for a week to work on this aspect of the movie. And, we changed it 10 times and this is where we ended up. And then we went to this consultant. And I'm thinking to myself, Black movies never have that kind of budget.
Right.
They don't have a budget that says if this part of the scene ain't right, we can sequester a team for 2 weeks to try to figure out how to make it right. We got to like do it on the fly. And then we as Black people judge it so harshly when the system set it up for it to be an inferior product. They give us some, but not enough.
Yeah. When everybody came against Coming to America, Eric LaSalle, who played the boyfriend in the first one, and he was also on ER. He couldn't be in the new one because he had prior commitments. And so, when it came out and everybody was dissing it, it's like, oh, it was this. Personally, I loved it. It wasn't supposed to be the first one. It was supposed to be its own thing, which it was, and it was funny, and it was a great story. And Eric LaSalle goes, and he was like, it's interesting how we as Black people, we want things, but then once we get what we ask for, we don't trust it. He said, don't you understand that everybody who worked on Coming to America, now again, I loved it. First time I saw it. In fact, I've seen it 4 times. But Eric LaSalle goes, don't you know that everybody who worked on that movie, nobody set out to make a bad movie. He said they didn't show up that day at work thinking, oh, let's make the worst movie we can possibly make. Let's have everybody rip it to shreds. He's like, no, he says, so you have to have the understanding that when these people came to work, the idea is that we're going to put our best foot forward according to the script and make a film that is marketable and that people will enjoy. It's not trying to be the first one, But for whatever reason, and this is one of the reasons why I think, you know, people say it wasn't real. I believe it was real. The Willie Lynch letter, I read that, man.
Yeah.
I can find Black society my whole 51 years wrapped up in that letter. There was every instance that he talked about in that letter. I was like, yep, seen that. Yep, there that is. I know what that looks like. And it's like, it makes sense that that letter would be real, because if you're going to keep the black community and Black people from being united, then you have to make them distrust one another. And that's and if you're a slave master, that was the best way to do it. Let's keep them separate so they don't trust. And we do that by making them not trust each other. And it's still carrying on to this very day.
Well, it's not trusting each other. It's not trusting the system. You know, all that's wrapped up together. Because I had a personal story, and some of you know that back in the day, significantly before I received my call, that I own restaurants and nightclubs. Mm-hmm. Second club I opened was in downtown Indianapolis, and I actually got a citation for being the first African American to open a nightery in downtown Indianapolis. You know, they gave me the proclamation of the day and all that stuff. But what happened was we opened, and I'm telling you guys, literally, the first 3 weeks we were open, I made more money than I had ever made in my life at that point. Wow. It would take me all day on Monday to count the money from the week. Wow. I mean, like I literally got pictures of cash stacked on my desk that I'm trying to reconcile.
Wow.
And we had like at night, we had 200 people in line. The line was all the way down to Rick's. And Union Station got angry because we brought so many Black people down. Now, mind you, this was the suit and tie crowd.
Right.
These were the people. This was not the thug crowd. This was not the guys. This was not the hat guys. This was the shirt and tie crowd. But they closed me down after 3 weeks saying that you're scaring our regular clientele.
Wow.
That, you know, when we see that many Blacks gather, they think it's gangs. I'm like, wait a minute. People in shirts and suits and ties, and you see them, and just because they're Black, you think it's a gang? Is what you're saying? Sorry, it was so bad that they actually gave me another space to have people wait in so they wouldn't have to be in the hallway.
Wow.
And what happened was they closed us down on a technicality. It took us 6 months to fight through the system to get back open. When we got back open, we were never able to regain that type of momentum because it had hurt the Black people that came so bad that they said in their mind, they're never going to let us have a place downtown. So we're not even going to get attached again.
Yeah.
Because we don't trust it. So we start going down, try to make this our place again. Then they close us down. Then we're hurt again. And so it was this whole mistrust of the system that then undermined me, a Black entrepreneur, from doing business.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. Like, if you think about the Expo, Expo was popping my whole life. Yeah. My favorite event was always Circle City Classic. I lived for that. It was even though it was real quick, it was the best event to me. You look at police influence, and if you know the origins of police, you know that police were founded in slavery times to catch runaway slaves. So that's the origin of police officers. And so when you see Black police officers, DNA that we have with them is because they were Black slavers, Black people that were slaves that the slave master put in power to keep us in check. So that's another issue with trust between us and authority. And so now you have a Black man who is in position to basically be abusive and aggressive to me at the hands of the master. So the master never, ever was perceived as the enemy. Trust me, I'm benevolent, I'm kind. Hate him because he hates you.
Right.
And so if you take that same measure and you put it into our businesses, our practices, our functions, when something doesn't go well, we go straight to the news and media, we say something about it. I think the biggest problem when it comes to trust is, how does that bleed into our personal relationships? How does that bleed into how we see our husbands and our wives and our children and our community? How does that bleed into the black, in the black community? The black dollar turns over once.
Yeah.
Once.
Yeah.
For example, in the Jewish community, it turns over 10 times before it leaves. And in the Asian community, I think it's like 7.5.
Yeah.
So they build in their community structures for economic growth and success so that it never leaves. The other interesting thing is when they say, well, your communities are impoverished. No, our mentalities are broken, because if there was no wealth, then the Indians and the Asians wouldn't set up gas stations on every single corner and make bread $5 or sell us the chicken fingers with the fried wedges and the little cup of ranch for $17. Or if you go to certain ones here where they're not meeting the health codes and it's rats going around, but you don't got no choice because you live in a food desert. The economy and the wealth is present, it's there. But our mentality and our trust, we are willing to go to a place where we're being oppressed for service, rather than take a chance on Big Mama's kitchen where she make jambalaya and pay her $7 so she can be better.
But it is not understanding how business works.
Yeah.
And then it's also the internal distrust that we can't trust each other. Because I mean, if you look at how the Asians have been able to take over the black hair care business, is because they all buy together. So they go together, and instead of you having this shop over here and this shop over there and this shop over there, they buy as one person. So they can command a lower rate, spread it out all over town. But then you get the independent black beauty place, they can't buy at that same price.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't trust each other to work together. Because back to the Willie Lynch kind of concept, it's kind of been locked in that only a few of us are going to make it.
Right.
So if I partner with you, you might be the one that end up making it and leaving me out. So now I've helped you make it. Because literally, I remember one time at the club, I'm walking by a couple guys, and this one guy said, man, you want another drink? And the other guy said, no, I'm not trying to make Hensley Green rich.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm like, what's that got to do with whether you want something or not? And so, see, in this brother's head, even though he was in my facility, his mentality was, I'm really not trying to see another brother prosper like that.
Yeah. And I think that mistrust, as we're talking, it permeates the black community. It permeates self-image. I said, and then I think it also turns into a mistrust for God. I think there are times when me and the producer of the show, Chris Green, were talking this morning, and we were discussing, the show topic and as it relates to Jesus and him being our rabbi, our intercessor. And I think things get to a point when it comes to the distrust that's so prevalent in our lives, in our community itself, that it's hard for us to even trust, the Savior of the world. And that's a crazy sort of space to be in. You say that, you trust this Palestinian who went to die for your sins on a tree, but then your actions are antithetical to trust itself. That's just so, it's so strange to me. So,
but D, if you think about it, it's like anger. If you're angry, a lot of times it's hard to confine that anger
Right.
to the
Right.
place
Agreed.
that the anger deserves to be.
Agreed. Agreed.
That anger will spill over in other aspects. So it's like, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but you remember when they were having all these issues about professional football players and domestic abuse.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I was saying to people, not that it's right. So I don't want anybody to hear like I'm justifying domestic abuse at all. But these are guys that get paid for responding violently.
Right. Right.
The more violent they respond, the bigger their paychecks.
Right.
Period. The more violent they respond on the football field, basically the bigger their paycheck. So then when they're in a relationship with a woman, and let's say the woman presses their buttons, or they get into whatever, I'm not trying to say it like it's the woman's fault, but his inclination, his instinct is to respond violently.
Right.
Because he's been trained, the more violent, the better. And it's just, it's hard to not have that spill over.
Yeah.
I was saying, like, I know coming up, I had an inherent distrust of the system. So there was a point when I was on child support. And because I was entrepreneurial, they could not just take it out of my paycheck.
Right.
So every 6 months, I had to come in and go to court, and they would review how I had been paying my child support. Mm-hmm. Now, I always paid it, and I always paid more than what I was supposed to pay. But I would tell you, the day before I went to court, I would go to the child support office and get my records, because I didn't trust the system enough, because it's like, if that system messed up, they're going to lock me up.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm intelligent. I got degrees, but I still go and get a piece of paper so that if they ever say he paid this much and he was supposed to, I'm like, no. Here's the paper. Let me. But what shocked me was my distrust of the system was that profound that I would use that kind of energy to make sure the system couldn't go left on me.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like, and it's good that you mentioned the term system. Race is a social construct based on economy and power. And so if you don't have the power, you can't play the game with the machine of the system. And so they know in that structure what they were doing at the inception of America. If you think about, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa race massacres, Black Wall Street. And it's amazing how that's not taught. Anything that is going to make the Caucasian community or that system of racism, classism, and oppression become visible and put it in your face when you have to see it, is always a bad. Think about Easter. Charleston Heston is nowhere near African American. Yeah. Why is he the king of Egypt? Why is he playing? Why is Ramesses white? Why are all of these figures from Africa whose skin is the same complexion of mine, if not darker? Why are they Caucasian? Because the power dynamics have to position. Why does Jesus look like he's just beautifully, just gorgeous, like he just pastel out of an artist's mind, and he looked gracefully beautiful hanging on the cross? When we know the scripture said he was not beautiful to behold, and that he had hair like mine, and his skin was like mine. That's what the Bible says. But you take the figures and you create them in powerful positions, and we never question it. We never ever asked. I think it was the movie Egypt Gods and Kings that came out several years ago.
Yeah.
Over in Israel, the movie was banned because they have a historical belief in religious texts. Nowhere in Africa or the Western Hemisphere was that movie shown, because they believe in what the Bible said, because it's the birthplace of everything, right? And so they have done a very, very good job in America, that European colonization type of attitude of making us believe that they were better than us when we were better than them. Think about Hank Aaron, your LeBron James or your Kaepernicks, or people who have stood for something. You tell them to be quiet, shut up, and dribble. So I'm good enough. Or recently, as of yesterday, Naomi Osaka pulled out of the French Open because she has depression and anxiety, and the French news are attacking her. Yeah. Like her body, her sport, her training belongs to them, like she's obligated to let you disrespect her and get fined for not responding naturally like a human. That's a problem. And so we trust these systems to take care of us, and they fail us every single time. And then when you speak up about it, you're deemed, angry, aggressive, nasty. So you're comfortable with go to pastor's church and hear him talk about the world, as long as he don't say nothing about us. Right. We're gonna take D script as long as it don't make us look bad. We'll let Talby consult as long as he don't tell me something about white people, or he don't say something that's going to offend a massive group of people. But we have to stomach that. I'm so over the selective outrage that people have in news and media and people in my community. It's so selective and it's irritating. You're not mad about the fact that someone told you not to even talk to me, and it was me. You look like me, and you told him for fear that I would have power that I don't even want over this individual, instead of figuring out a way how to work together so we can collectively rise. And so this is not something that I think our generation or the generation behind mine or the one after that is going to conquer. I hate to say it that way, but it's so inherently bred into us to compete against one another.
Well, but the system doesn't trust us either.
Nope.
Right.
I mean, because the thing that like white people don't understand is like how many times as a black man, you get in the elevator and the white woman clutches her purse.
Like we want it.
Like, you dressed, you got on a tie, whatever, and it don't even matter, but she thinks you gonna steal her purse.
Right.
And you're the executive.
Walking down the street and somebody sit in the car and they lock the door. And I was telling my white friends, like, how many times, like, back in the day, I used to just go to the department stores to bother the security guards, because like you knew they was going to follow you. So I'd pick stuff up, move it from one place to another, put it down, because it was like, like their inherent thought was that you were going to steal something. Yeah. Or this is the one that I still get today that like just blows me away. When you go somewhere and white people think it has to be an event for you to be there. So you go to the nice restaurant and they're like, oh, are we celebrating something this evening? Yeah. Do you say that to all the white people that sit down because this is a steakhouse? Or is it just that you judged me as a black person and said they must be doing something special? They can't just be here because they want to be here.
And then they get mad and do what they did to you. You establish an amazing edifice downtown. And so you tell us that you don't want us there. So we're so creative that we know how to gather together outside and still have the best time of our lives. Right. Or somebody has an entrepreneurial spirit and the economic wherewithal and know how to build it, and we show up for them and y'all mad still. I don't understand that. You don't want me in yours, but you don't want me to have my own because you want us to shop with you. But then we don't like the experience that we have with you. So we go to our own, and then you find a way to cause a problem to stop me from having it. Riverside Park is a classic example of that down here. When I was going to Riverside when I was younger, free for all on Sunday. All of a sudden, you go in there now, they literally cut off half the park so black people can't park and have fun.
Right.
But if you go to Psalms Park,
Yep,
or any other park in a white community in the city of Indianapolis, that ain't the case. They let them do whatever they want to do. Drink, open, carry, whatever. But we just kind of let our cars and our sprinters go, have good, clean fun, laugh and joke, barbecue, play horseshoes. But you don't want us at yours. So when we go create ours, you come into our spaces and police us yet again. So
it is a fear, though. They have a fear of us.
Yeah.
Because if you gather 30 black men and walk in downtown Indianapolis, you're going to start a ruckus.
Oh, yes, a problem.
And you don't have to do anything, just walk, because they're like, okay, what is this? What are they doing? Okay, why are they together?
Walking.
What's happening here? It's like that whole distrust. And so I think the challenge for us is that we're in a system of distrust, where we distrust, the system distrusts us, we distrust each other. And so it's just spilling over to so many aspects of life. How do we get out of this cycle?
And you know what? I was on the rooftop on Wilshire in LA, and I was meeting with a producer. And his assistant producer, associate producer, a Jewish woman, Caucasian woman. I was glad to meet this brother, and we was talking and having a great time and just talking shop. And at the end of it, I said, "Man, can we get a selfie?" He was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I gave his assistant my phone. Now, I have a setting on my phone to where it'll take literally a 2-second video and then snap the picture, so that you don't, so it allows you to get your chance to get set first, and you can go back and literally play it. So she was having an issue with it, and she was like, "Is this an Android? Is this an Android?" And I was like, "Yeah, why? You need to get an iPhone." Okay. And so I was gonna let it ride, because I take pleasure in destroying iPhoners anyway when they start talking crazy. And so she was like, she kept it going, and she was trying to make me think that because I use a Samsung, that I was beneath her, or that I couldn't compare to her. And so I politely shared with her a couple of Google searches. I said, your iPhone, it uses Samsung parts, and the screen is made by LG. So whenever you get through with it, your iPhone is a lot like the white race. You take things from other places and try to make it seem like you're original. You're really not. iPhone's not that original. She looked, I said, and then I went on, I said, Android is more like black people. There's 1,000 different versions of Android, but there's only one iPhone. And she looked at me, and I was like, don't try to make me feel as though I don't know what's good for me. I know what's good for me. If I wanted a system that was going to put me where it wanted me to be, I use an iPhone. But if I want the ambiguity of productivity, then you go with a Samsung or a Huawei or a Sony. But don't try to make me feel less than because I don't have an iPhone. And so you're right, Pastor, that whole trust thing, it bleeds over into everything, even into cell phone use. I'm like, baby, come on now, don't do that. We don't have to do this.
So how do we get around this thing? How do we begin to trust us?
Well, you have to show yourself trustworthy, because I'm going to be real, and I hate to say this, but the honesty is that all of us are not good at what we say we're good at. All of us do not have great follow through. All of us are not good business people. Some of us are swindlers. The issue is that those genetic things and the other experiences. I remember riding in the car with my pastor, and I said, I am going to be a wealthy black man, and I'm going to employ as many black people as I can, and I'm going to contract with black-owned businesses. And their response was, a couple of people in the car, well, I mean, if they show up on time. And I said, wait a minute, hold on. We're not going to do that. Because see, I am the person who happens to study and be educated And though you guys had degrees in the car, I'm not the war you want when it comes to stuff like this. You just sat here and said and based the ability of an African-American business or institution to be faithful based on your limited experience with one person. And let me be clear, you kept using them when they wronged you. So who's stupid here? The business owner, or the fact that you continue to give them a chance when they showed you who they are and you didn't believe them?
Mm-hmm.
We have to have a better level of integrity, but we also have to have the attitude of teaching people to be better people. A lot of us step out on faith and we build businesses because we've been unctioned by God to do something, or we had a great idea that you don't see out here, and we're afraid to partner, as you said a couple sessions ago about mentorship, getting with somebody who's not afraid or intimidated by your success. And so when you teach a person that they may not, your first year as a club owner, you may not do well, but I'm gonna help you, and I'm going to sincerely stick with you so you don't make the mistakes that I made. So when you run into situations where your trust is compromised or it's questioned, you have the wherewithal as a businessman or businesswoman to stand flat-footed and say, this is what it is. Some of us are grimy in what we do. Some of us can't be trusted. I just think that those stories are stories that we in our community promote more than those that are doing the right thing. And we have to change the narrative. That's the only way we're going to get around it, because I'm not going to go spend my money with you if I got to sit here. If you said that you started, your restaurant opens up at 12 and I really, really, really want your catfish. And so the first time you were late, I didn't really, really trip because, I get it, things happen. But then I come back the next time and I'm here until 3, only because I don't have anything to do, and you don't open until 6. You take that, even if you look at like the HBCU movement. Me and my niece were just having this conversation today. She goes to a very, very illustrious HBCU. They messed up her financial aid. They didn't communicate last year with her that housing was not coming. Didn't tell them that they're going to have virtual session because of the pandemic. You had people book tickets and flights to come here and sign leases for apartments in your city and didn't tell them. And so this is a cultural thing for us, to not do business well when we need to, and we're in the public eye, whether we want to or not. So people like you, Pastor, people like you, D, who have had that experience, gotta be the voice to say, hey, y'all, listen, we need to do this the right way, and this is how. If not, we're gonna continue to have a cycle. And my generation are gonna be the same grimy individuals, the few that exist in our community that continue this trend.
Well, I agree to a degree. A lot of times what I see is based on what you said about categorizing a few. Mm-hmm. And so like people will take the few extreme cases and try to project it on the whole of the group. It's just like with pastors. Like when the pastors of LA came out and all these dudes are like driving Rolls and Bentleys and living in mansions. And, one, I don't have a problem with that, because if you make that much of a difference, like, I used to throw this line at everybody. You worried about what I drive, but you don't care what the president of Eli Lilly drives.
Right.
Now I'm affecting lives, he's affecting lives, but you okay with him living however he lives. But now I'm not supposed to be able to enjoy life when I'm making a significant contribution. But that being set aside, for every one pastor I know that's living like
that,
I can give you 300 that are not.
Right.
Facts. Right.
But people want to say that, see there, they always taking people's money. They're always doing this. They just out for themselves. And I'm like, yo, there's good pastors and there's bad pastors, and there's pastors in between. There's good cops, there are bad cops, and there's cops in between. There's good teachers, there's bad teachers. Whatever it is, you're going to get the gamut of range, and we got to stop just taking the worst and allowing that to categorize the whole of our people.
Right. Right.
Beyond that, I think we're going to have to gather in collaboratives
Yes.
to begin to change the narratives. I think we're going to have to be able to get some very like-minded people. And unfortunately, I think we're going to have to be rigid about that like-mindedness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where we get people that can work together. Then when they prosper and excel, I think that might be able to begin to change the narratives, because most successful Black people come off as lone wolves.
Yeah. 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 Agreed. Agreed.
This is real.
And so, I'm saying if we can start building collaboratives where we're not afraid to share information and to tell each other what we find out about how the system works, and we can trust each other in the process without letting discourse be sold into us. Yeah, this is a little bit off subject, but it just feels like it fits. Like, have y'all watched Unsung?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like, why? It's the same story. Every group has the same. I haven't seen one that does not follow the exact same storyline yet.
Right.
They come together, they work together, they build something significant. Then somebody gets talked into the fact they've got more talent or they're doing more work. So now they want to go solo. So now they sabotage the group. And then usually for the most part, the solo career doesn't work. The group disbands. Then 20 years later, when they outdated and the price of the bag has dramatically changed, they have come to the fact that $10,000 a night is better than what we can make somewhere. And I'm like, why do we have to go through all of that to understand, hey, we got a good thing. Let's just work together and everybody get the bag.
Yeah. And, Pastor, and back to what you said about the collaboratives and trusting one another. I just don't think it can happen until I couldn't trust you and Toby on this show unless I trusted myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have to trust me first. And in order to trust me with me, I'd have to be honest about who I am, honest about my abilities, honest about my contributions to the code, and know what I can bring to the table, so that when I meet with these two other collaborative minds, and the third mind with being the producer, I don't feel as though I have to step on proverbial toes or try to outshine, because that's where I think the trust really just kind of goes awry. Somebody don't know who they are, and when they see somebody else doing something, then it feels like an invasion. And so now I can't trust you because you out of your lane, so to speak. So I think in order for those sorts of things to work, the people involved have to understand and trust self first.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, let's just take a few moments, give everybody a few moments to kind of give your final thoughts on this whole trust subject matter, and we'll wrap it up here.
Again, for me, if you can't trust you, it's going to be hard to trust anybody else. So take the steps and do the work necessary so that you trust your own ability. See, and I think really when it comes down to trusting you, there has to be a confidence there. Jesus, when he did what he was doing and he got off into his ministry, he trusted himself because he knew who he was. And so therefore, the people who were with him, the disciples, didn't feel threatened because he knew who he was. If he didn't know who he was, then that doubt in self is passed on to the people who are around him. And now there's no trust anywhere because nobody knows who the next person is. So know who you are. Know who you are. Trust you.
The best way to cultivate trust within yourself and within other people is to be as honest, integral, and transparent as possible. about your flaws, about your areas of improvement, where you're under construction at. All those things matter, because when you are trustworthy, people will protect what you do and who you are. Even though you're going to be tried and people are going to try you, but when you've been good to people, scripture says that a good name is more valuable than silver and gold, meaning that the amount of money that you can get in the earth does not compare to the experience that I feel internally when someone mentions you. And so in order to do that, you have to be integral, you have to be upfront, and you have to be willing to stand flat-footed on what you believe, because your name matters.
And I would say something similar. I believe trusting God will spill over to trust in the rest of your life. The more you're able to trust God, the more I think you'll be able to trust in general. People have their shortcomings, and so they may fall short. But when you trust that God will handle it regardless of what that outcome is, I think it opens you up in a way that you can risk trusting more.
Amen. Amen.
Well,
Agreed.
you got something out of this conversation. This is a heavy conversation. I feel like I need to go take a nap now. This is, this whole, we've gone from slavery all the way up in the mix, and still feel like we're dealing with this trust issue. But take this conversation and use it as a starting point for some conversations for yourself, because until we conquer this thing of trust as a people, we may be doomed to hold the places that we've been stuck in. Well, thank you for joining us. This is Pastor Henry Green, and this has been The Code.